This isn't a hypothetical. On May 8, 1945, as Victory in Europe Day swept across Allied nations with unparalleled jubilation and relief, a truly unprecedented scenario unfolded in a small, unassuming facility near while male German prisoners of war across the United States prepared for their forced repatriation to a devastated homeland. A unique cohort of German women faced a different kind of reckoning. These were members of the Wehrmachthelferinnen, the German Women's Auxiliary Corps, captured during the war's harrowing final months. When an American commander announced their freedom, their collective response defied military protocol, international conventions, and indeed, common sense. They pleaded to stay. What complex alchemy of circumstances could compel individuals to reject the promise of home for continued confinement with the very enemy they served? Before we delve into this captivating narrative, please take a moment to like this video and share your initial thoughts in the comments below. Your engagement helps us bring these forgotten histories to light. The roots of this extraordinary decision stretch back 6 months prior, to November 1944. As Allied forces surged through France and Belgium, a small, makeshift prisoner of war camp at Dietzburg became home to fewer than 60 German women. Unlike the sprawling male POW facilities, this compound was intimate, housing auxiliaries aged primarily between 18 and 35. These were not frontline combatants, but young women who had supported the German war effort as vital radio operators, skilled nurses, and meticulous administrative personnel. Overseeing this singular facility was Captain Margaret Sullivan, one of the few female officers assigned to such a role. She vividly recalled their arrival, a stark procession of women disembarking from transport trucks, their tattered gray uniforms, some still adorned with badges of a now-fallen regime, reflecting a complex blend of stoic resignation and profound uncertainty. Among them was 23-year-old Ingrid Brunner, a former communications specialist from Hamburg, who had joined the Wehrmachthelferinnen in 1943 with a genuine, if misguided, belief in defending her homeland. Now, she clutched a worn, leather-bound diary, her only tangible connection to a life that had been irrevocably shattered. The initial weeks at Dietzburg were marked by an almost palpable silence, a rigid barrier of unspoken tension. The German women, adhering to a disciplined military bearing, moved through their routines with mechanical precision. Their interactions limited to hushed German phrases during meals. They presented an outward facade of stoicism, a deliberate detachment cultivated through years of ideological indoctrination that painted American soldiers as ruthless, dehumanized adversaries. Captain Sullivan observed this unyielding posture, recognizing it as a defense mechanism, a reflection of deeply ingrained beliefs about their captors. Yet, as autumn yielded to the biting cold of winter, this meticulously constructed wall began to subtly crumble. Brick by unexpected brick. The catalysts were not grand gestures or political pronouncements, but small, deeply human acts that defied their every expectation. Corporal James Morrison, a humble farm boy from Iowa, noticed Anna Weber, a petite, blonde prisoner, suffering from a persistent cough. Defying protocol, he quietly procured an extra blanket and a mug of hot herbal tea, a remedy from his grandmother's recipe. Anna, whose worldview had been rigorously shaped by wartime propaganda, stared in open astonishment. Her blue eyes, once hard with distrust, widened with an unfamiliar, perplexing gratitude. The enemy had shown her unexpected kindness. A soft thank you escaped her lips, the first genuine expression of gratitude since her capture, and in that moment, the rigid posture she had maintained for months visibly softened. This single act of empathy was not just about warmth. It was about the piercing of an ideology by the undeniable force of shared humanity. These small, empathetic gestures quickly resonated throughout the camp. Sergeant Robert Chun, whose parents had immigrated from China, understood firsthand the isolating experience of being perceived as an outsider or foreigner. He began to spontaneously teach basic English phrases to any prisoner who showed interest, often resorting to gestures and rudimentary drawings when language barriers proved too challenging. Ingrid found herself increasingly drawn to these impromptu lessons. She had some rudimentary English from school and discovered a natural aptitude for languages. More profoundly, she began to perceive something in the faces of the Americans that directly contradicted everything she had been indoctrinated to believe. She observed curiosity rather than animosity. She witnessed unexpected moments of shared humanity rather than the brutality she had been led to expect. Christmas of 1944 proved to be the first truly significant watershed moment. Captain Sullivan had deliberated on how to approach the holiday, understanding that many German prisoners were undoubtedly battling profound homesickness and depression. She ultimately decided to organize a modest celebration, allowing the women to craft simple decorations from available materials. What transpired next astonished everyone. Ingrid, using her carefully articulated, accented English, hesitantly approached Captain Sullivan with a request. "Captain, we could sing German Christmas songs for you, but also," she paused, searching for the right words, "we have tried to learn some American songs." That evening, in the camp's main hall, all 60 German women stood before their American custodians and sang. They began with O Tannenbaum, their voices rising with the precise harmony inherent in German musical tradition. But then, something truly striking occurred. They attempted Silent Night in English. Their pronunciation was imperfect, yet their heartfelt intention was unmistakably clear. Corporal Morrison later wrote to his family, "Ma, I never thought I'd say this, but listening to those German girls sing tonight, I momentarily forgot we were enemies. They looked so young, so far from home, reminded me of Sarah and her friends back in Cedar Rapids." That evening proved catalytic, marking a definitive turning point in the camp's atmosphere. Conversations between guards and prisoners grew more frequent and natural. The German women began to volunteer for additional camp duties, not out of obligation, but from a seemingly genuine desire to contribute. They assisted in the kitchens, mended uniforms, and some with medical training even aided the camp nurses. Ingrid, whose English was improving rapidly, found herself becoming an unofficial translator and mediator, building a vital bridge between the two groups. In these interactions, she discovered that many of the American soldiers harbored a similar homesickness and uncertainty about the future as the German prisoners themselves. This reciprocal understanding fostered a deeper, unexpected connection. By February 1945, the camp's dynamics had undergone a seismic shift. The German women no longer segregated themselves during meals. Instead, a blend of English and German conversation echoed throughout the compound. Sergeant Chun formalized his efforts, organizing informal classes where prisoners taught German phrases while continuing to learn English. However, what truly redefined everything was the unsettling news that began to filter in from Germany. As Allied forces pushed deeper into German territory, reports started to emerge detailing the horrific conditions they uncovered. Stories of concentration camps, systematic atrocities, and an unfathomable scale of terror that most ordinary Germans claimed to have never known. Ingrid, poring over American newspapers in the camp library, felt a growing sense of shock and disbelief. The photographs were often blurry, yet the accompanying descriptions were chillingly clear. Her hands trembled as she read accounts of Bergen-Belsen and Dachau, places she had never heard of, yet which evidently existed within the very nation she had once proudly served. Anna Weber found her there, tears streaming down her face. "Ingrid?" she whispered in German. "Is this true? Our country truly did these things." Other women gathered around the newspapers, their faces mirroring the same confusion and dread. These were not staunch Nazi ideologues, but young women who had joined auxiliary forces believing they were defending their homeland. Now, they were confronting the dreadful possibility that they had been part of something far darker than they could have ever imagined. From across the room, Captain Sullivan observed the German women grappling with this new, devastating reality. She had witnessed similar shock on the faces of male German posts when confronted with such truths. Yet, she had never before seen such raw anguish, a suffering that profoundly shattered everything these women had believed about their own identities. That night, Ingrid wrote in her diary, "What kind of Germany are we to return to? What kind of Germany did we serve? I thought I knew who I was, and what I believed. Now, I understand nothing." This entry captured an existential crisis, a complete dismantling of their moral and national compass. The spring of 1945 culminated in victory for Europe. Yet for the German prisoners at Deedsburg, it ushered in a period of immense uncertainty. While mileposts across the nation began their repatriation, the status of the 60 women remained precarious. Officials in Washington deliberated over their identity, while the women themselves confronted an even more anguishing question. What kind of place did they wish to return to? Reports from Germany painted a desolate picture of a disintegrated landscape. Cities lay in ruins, families were scattered or deceased, and the nation they had once known had ceased to exist. Many of the women had lost contact with their families months, even years, prior, leaving them with a visceral fear that no one, or nothing, might be awaiting their return. Paradoxically, amidst this external devastation, their daily lives within the American camp had metamorphosed into something none of them could have foreseen. Their initial captivity had gradually evolved into a semblance of community. American staff no longer viewed them strictly as enemy prisoners, but as displaced persons caught in circumstances beyond their control. Ingrid, in particular, had begun corresponding with a local family, the who started visiting the camp as part of a church outreach program. Mrs. Henderson, the school teacher, was deeply impressed by Ingrid's intellect and a rapid command of English. More significantly, she was moved by the young woman's profound remorse for the truths she had uncovered about her nation's actions. "You are not responsible for what you never knew," Mrs. Henderson told her during one conversation. "The question is, what will you do now with the knowledge you possess?" However, earning the forgiveness and understanding of Americans was one thing. These women knew that returning to Germany would entail a starkly different reception. They would likely be seen as failures, as prisoners of war, corrupted by enemy influence. Worse, they would be returning to a nation that no longer reflected the values they had once believed they were fighting for. As the official announcement of their impending repatriation drew nearer, conversations among the German women escalated in both intensity and desperation. Within this American POW camp, they had found something they had never before experienced: acceptance, a renewed sense of purpose, and the unexpected possibility of redemption. It had become an unforeseen sanctuary. The morning of May 15, 1945, was charged with an unusual, palpable anticipation. Captain Sullivan had convened all German prisoners for a general assembly to officially announce the repatriation procedures. The 60 women gathered in the main hall, their faces reflecting months of internal struggle over what this moment would signify for their futures. Captain Sullivan stood before them, holding official documents from the War Department. Her voice, serene yet empathetic, began. "Ladies, I have received orders concerning a repatriation to Germany. Transportation will be arranged within the next 2 weeks. You will be transferred to displaced persons camps in Europe and then released to return home." She paused, observing the flicker of both relief and anxiety on their faces. What she did not anticipate, however, was what transpired next. Ingrid Brunner slowly, yet resolutely, rose to her feet, her hands visibly trembling. Addressing the captain directly in clear, deliberate English, she asked, "Captain Sullivan, may I speak on behalf of some of us?" Granted permission, Ingrid surveyed the other prisoners before continuing. "We've discussed this internally for many weeks. Some of us, a number of us, do not wish to return to Germany immediately." These words reverberated with a seismic impact, like a sudden peal of thunder. Several American guards exchanged bewildered glances. Anna Weber then rose, followed by 12 other women. They formed a small, determined cluster within the assembly, their decision evidently made with long-pondered conviction. With halting English, Anna articulated, "Captain, we know our request is unusual, but Germany is no longer our home. The Germany we served, we discovered, was not the Germany we so fervently believed in." Captain Sullivan was momentarily rendered speechless. In her entire military career, she had never encountered such an unprecedented anomaly. Prisoners of war requesting to remain in captivity rather than embrace freedom. She sought clarification, which was met with a torrent of emotion that revealed the profound metamorphosis these women had undergone. Ingrid explained that they had written to the International Red Cross, desperately attempting to locate their families. Among the 14 women desiring to stay, only 3 had received any news from home. Of those 3, 2 had learned that their entire families had perished in Allied bombings. The others remained utterly uncertain if their loved ones had survived the war. More importantly, they had discovered something within the American camp that they now feared losing. "Here," Ingrid continued, "we learned what it means to be treated with dignity, even as an enemy. We saw kindness where we expected cruelty. We were given the opportunity to work, to contribute, and to become better people than when we first arrived. They had found a place where their intrinsic worth was recognized. The implications of their request were profound. Legally, they remained enemy prisoners of war. The Geneva Convention stipulated their repatriation, not prolonged residence in the United States. Yet, their poignant, emotional appeal resonated far deeper than legal protocols. Corporal Morrison, who had shown Anna Weber that initial kindness months earlier, approached Captain Sullivan after the assembly. "Ma'am," he said softly, "perhaps I'm overstepping, but these women are no longer our enemies. They are just people caught up in something bigger than they understood. It feels wrong to send them back to nothing." That night, Captain Sullivan dispatched an urgent telegram to her superiors, describing this unprecedented situation. A reply would take several days to arrive, leaving everyone in a strange limbo. The women who had chosen to stay continued their daily routines, but with a renewed intensity, as if striving to prove the inherent worthiness of their extraordinary request. This was no longer just about survival. It was about defining their future. During this tense period of waiting for official word from Washington, life within the camp took on an almost surreal quality. Those who had requested to remain threw themselves back into their work with fervent purpose, as if their contributions might somehow influence decisions being made hundreds of miles away. Yet, their efforts revealed something deeper than mere strategy. They genuinely found meaning in their daily activities. Ingrid, for instance, became indispensable, not only as a linguistic translator but also as a bridge for cultural understanding. She helped mediate disputes among other prisoners, assisted with administrative tasks, and even began teaching German to several curious American staff members. Her diary entries from this period reveal a woman discovering talents and interests she never knew she possessed. Anna Weber, working under Dr. Robert Hayes, the camp's medical officer, found her calling. Her meticulous attention to detail and innate empathy made her an exceptional nursing assistant. Dr. Hayes, initially skeptical about having a German prisoner work in his medical facility, eventually became one of her most steadfast advocates. "She has a gift for healing," he informed Captain Sullivan. "It would be a tragedy to waste it." Other women, too, discovered unexpected roles. Maria Gotcha, former administrative clerk, entirely streamlined the camp's record-keeping system. Greta Hoffman unearthed a hidden talent for mechanical repair, fixing everything from kitchen equipment to vehicles. Each woman, in her own way, was becoming an indispensable part of the facility's daily operations. However, their integration was not without controversy. News of the German women's request to remain leaked into the nearby communities, eliciting a polarized reaction. Some local newspapers published editorials questioning why Nazi prisoners were receiving special treatment while American soldiers were still sacrificing their lives in the Pacific. Others, particularly church groups who had interacted with the women, wrote letters of support, emphasizing their visible transformation and profound remorse. Mrs. Henderson, the schoolteacher who had befriended Ingrid, organized a delegation of local residents to meet with camp officials. "These women are not the same people who were brought here 8 months ago," she argued. "They're a poignant testament to what redemption can look like when people are given a chance to change." This debate soon began to transcend the local level. Newspapers in both Boston and New York reported on the story, with headlines ranging from "Nazi captives refuse freedom" to "Captured women find new life in America." The unfolding narrative became emblematic of larger questions concerning justice, forgiveness, and the very possibility of human transformation. Concurrently, letters began to arrive from other POW camps across the nation. German prisoners elsewhere, having heard of the women at Deedsburg, wrote expressing their own conflicted feelings about repatriation. Some requested transfers to the Massachusetts facility, hoping to postpone their return to Germany. The ripple effect generated by these women's unprecedented request extended far beyond anyone's initial expectations, revealing a widespread yearning for a different kind of post-war existence. Amidst this period of heightened suspense, an unbidden guest arrived at the camp. Father Heinrich Müller, a German-American pastor from nearby Worcester, requested permission to speak with the women in their native tongue. Captain Sullivan, hoping the pastor's spiritual guidance might help resolve the complex situation, granted his request. Father Müller His 3-hour conversation with the women proved to be a pivotal moment in their understanding of their own predicament. Speaking in German, he helped them articulate emotions they had struggled to express with the nuance of English. Crucially, however, he challenged them to fully consider the implications of their choice. Father Muller's visit forced the women to confront the uncomfortable truths inherent in their decision to remain. For the first time in months, communicating in their mother tongue, they were able to fully express the complex, pent-up emotions within them. But the pastor offered no simple solace or easy solutions. Instead, he presented them with existential dilemmas concerning responsibility, identity, and the very meaning of home. "You say you have found kindness here," he addressed the assembled women. "But what kindness can you offer to others suffering in Germany? You say Germany is no longer your home. But is it not precisely when a home is broken and in need of rebuilding that it needs you most?" Ingrid found herself profoundly challenged by these words. She had focused intently on what she stood to lose by returning to Germany, without ever considering what remaining in America might cost others. Was their choice to pursue this seemingly easier path inherently selfish? Was their desire to stay driven by genuine principle, or merely by a fear of confronting the consequences of their nation's actions? The pastor's visit ignited a fierce debate among the women. Some began to reconsider their decision, wrestling with whether their responsibility lay in returning to help rebuild their devastated homeland. Others became even more steadfast in their conviction that they could better serve by becoming exemplars of transformation and reconciliation in America. These intense internal deliberations were abruptly interrupted by the orders Captain Sullivan finally received from Washington. The reply, while marked by typical bureaucratic rigidity, also displayed an unexpected flexibility. The War Department would not impede the repatriation of any prisoner who wished to return immediately. However, given the highly unusual circumstances and the ongoing chaos in occupied Germany, those who desired to remain could be reclassified as displaced persons and process potential immigration status. This decision meant the women would no longer be prisoners of war, but they also would no longer be guaranteed housing and support within the camp. They would need to secure sponsors, employment, and housing within American communities willing to accept former enemy nationals. In many respects, this path presented a more arduous and uncertain challenge than simply returning to Germany. This announcement polarized the original 14 women who had requested to stay. 5 concluded that the uncertainty was too great and opted for repatriation. They would return to Germany with a blend of courage and apprehension, prepared to face whatever awaited them. But 9 women, including Ingrid and Anna, chose to embrace the challenge and embark on entirely new lives in the United States. The process of finding sponsors and employment proved more expeditious than anyone had anticipated. The Henderson family immediately offered to sponsor Ingrid, providing her with housing and support while she sought translation work. Dr. Hayes championed Anna's cause, arranging for her to continue her medical training at a local hospital and promising to oversee her transition from assistant to registered nurse. Other local families, moved by the women's stories and their evident sincerity, also extended their support. Communities initially skeptical of having German prisoners nearby now enthusiastically embraced the opportunity to participate in what they viewed as a uniquely American narrative of redemption and a second chance. Perhaps the most profound development, however, was the decision made by some of the women who chose repatriation. They announced their intention to return to Germany not as defeated prisoners, but as ambassadors of the reconciliation they had experienced in America. Their hope was to carry back the lessons they had learned about forgiveness, fostering cooperation, and how former adversaries could indeed become friends. The culminating day of repatriation was June 20th, 1945. The scene at Deedsburg stood in stark contrast to any other in the history of American POW operations. Instead of the typical tense and formal process of sending defeated enemies home, the atmosphere felt more like a poignant community farewell. The 46 women who had chosen repatriation stood in formation, but their once rigid military bearing had visibly mellowed over the preceding months. They carried letters from American soldiers, photographs taken during their time in the camp, and small gifts from guards and staff. More significantly, they carried with them a profoundly altered understanding of America. Captain Sullivan addressed the departing women in what she later described as one of the most poignant moments of her military career. "You came here as our enemies," she told them. But you leave as something we never anticipated, friends. I hope you will remember that Americans can show mercy without forgetting justice, and that even in the darkest of times, redemption is possible. Ingrid, now the unofficial spokesperson for those remaining, stood to reply. Her English had grown fluent and confident over the months. Captain Sullivan, we came here believing we knew what America was. We found we knew nothing. We believed Americans were our enemies. We discovered that the only true enemy was our own ignorance and hatred. This eloquent statement encapsulated the profound insight they had gained. The women who remained watched as their friends boarded the transport vehicles that would carry them to Boston Harbor and then on to ships bound for Europe. Tears were shed by both groups, but they were tears of hope, not despair. Both contingents were embarking on journeys into unknown futures. Yet these were journeys of their own choosing, rather than ones merely endured. For those who remained in the United States, the transition from prisoner to emigrant proved challenging, yet immensely fulfilling. Ingrid found work as a translator for the U.S. State Department, helping process thousands of displaced persons arriving from war-ravaged Europe. Her unique perspective, as someone who had experienced both sides of the conflict, proved invaluable in bridging cultural and linguistic divides. Hannah completed a nursing certification, eventually becoming head nurse at Worcester General Hospital. Her story became locally renowned, and she was frequently invited to speak to community groups about the possibilities of forgiveness and transformation. She remained unmarried, dedicating her life to caring for others, a quiet way of seeking to atone for her nation's wartime actions. Other women who stayed similarly found paths to contribution and belonging. Some married American soldiers they had met during their captivity, building families that exemplified reconciliation between former enemies. Others forged careers in education, social work, and business, always mindful of the power of human kindness to overcome hatred. Perhaps the most compelling aspect of their ongoing story, however, was how they maintained contact with those who had returned to Germany. Letters flowed back and forth across the Atlantic, establishing a transatlantic network of women united by their shared experiences of transformation. Those who had repatriated often wrote of the immense challenges of rebuilding lives in a devastated Germany, but also how their time in America had instilled in them a newfound sense of hope and resilience. Years later, as historians began to study this unprecedented case of prisoners of war choosing to remain in captivity, they discovered that this story had profoundly influenced American policy toward occupied Germany. The kindness extended to these women provided salutary evidence of the efficacy of treating former enemies with dignity and offering genuine opportunities for redemption. 25 years after that extraordinary day when German female posts begged to remain in American captivity, Ingrid Brunner Henderson stood before an assembly at the United Nations in New York. She had been invited to speak on reconciliation and the power of individual transformation to overcome historical animosity. Now an American citizen with adult children, she held the same small, leather-bound diary she'd clutched upon her initial arrival at D. Her speech that day is widely considered one of the most moving testimonies at the UN on the possibilities of peace between former enemies. She recounted the morning Captain Sullivan announced they were free to return to Germany, and how that announcement had forced them to confront life's most essential question. What is the true meaning of home? We discovered, she told the international audience, that home is not merely where you come from. It is where you choose to build your life. A place that celebrates the best of humanity, not its worst. We discovered that forgiveness is not something granted to you by others. It is something you earn through your actions and your commitment to becoming better than you were before. The story of the German women who chose to remain transcended mere historical anecdote. It became a potent emblem of America's capacity for redemption and renewal. It bore testament to the idea that even in the darkest of times, individuals can choose to rise above hatred and recognize the shared humanity in their adversaries. Anna Weber, by then Dr. Anna Weber, returned to Germany in 1965 as part of a medical exchange program. She found a nation utterly transformed, not just in its rebuilt cities and infrastructure, but in its rejuvenated values and commitment to human rights. She often stated that her experience in American captivity allowed her to fully appreciate Germany's transformation, for she herself had undergone a profound personal metamorphosis. Those women who had initially chosen repatriation in 1945 also played a pivotal role in Germany's reconstruction, carrying stories of American kindness. They helped persuade other Germans that their former enemies could become credible partners in building a better future. Several became leaders in German-American friendship societies, tirelessly working to strengthen the bonds between the two nations. Yet, perhaps the most enduring legacy of their collective story lies in its profound impact on how America viewed its responsibilities toward former adversaries. Their successful integration created a paradigm that influenced refugee and immigration policies for decades to come. It demonstrated that America's greatest strength resided not solely in its military might, but in its unique capacity to offer second chances to those willing to embrace its core values of dignity, opportunity, and redemption. As Ingrid concluded her address at the United Nations, she raised the small, leather-bound diary that had accompanied her throughout her extraordinary journey from enemy prisoner to American citizen. Within these pages, she stated, I wrote down the questions every human must answer for themselves. Who am I? What do I believe? What kind of person do I choose to become? The most remarkable thing about America is that it gave me the freedom to discover that I could choose answers different from those I was once given. This final, poignant gesture encapsulated the essence of her transformation and the enduring power of self-determination. The resonating narrative of these German women who pleaded to stay serves as a powerful reminder that even amidst the darkest chapters of human history, individuals possess the agency to write different endings for their lives. It unequivocally demonstrates that redemption is not only possible but profound when societies are willing to offer it. The most potent victory over hatred lies in transforming enemies into friends, prisoners into citizens, and despair into enduring hope. Today, their story continues to inspire new generations of Americans and Germans alike. It stands as an enduring testament to humanity's capacity for growth and change, proving that these qualities can bridge even the deepest divisions forged by war and animosity. Their choice to remain was not born of a desire to easily escape the consequences of the past, but rather because they had discovered something within their American captivity, something they wished to fervently champion and share with the world for the rest of their lives.